ስለዚህ ቀጽልና ዘላትና ሓፍትና ሰናይት ተክለ ብዛዕባ ማዕርነት ደቂ ኣንስትዮ ያ ክትገልፀልና ፌሚኒዝም ጥቕሙን ጉድኣቱን ምስቲ ናይ ሕብረተሰብና ኣገናዚባ ክትነግረና እያ ማለት እዩ እቲ ናይ ሻዕብያ ዝገብሮ እቲ ማዕርነት ዘይኮነሲ እቲ ኢንተርናሽናል ዝኾነ ብማዕረባውያን ዝርእይዎ ሓፈሻዊ ምስቲ ናትና ብኸመይ ክወሃድ ይኽእል ወዘተ ዝብል ክትገልፀልና እያ ማለት እዩ ቴንኪዩ ሰናይት ናባኺ
ኣምሲኹም ከመይ ኣለኹም እዛ ተዋሂባትን ዘላ ርእስቲ ፌሚኒዝም እያ ትብል ብእንግሊሽ ከዓ ተዋሂባትኒ ምናልባት ትቐልል ትኸውን እያ ብእንግሊሽ ክንገብራ ምክንያቱ መብዛሕትኡ እቲ ኣብ ዓድና ዘይለመድናዮ ናይ ፌሚኒዝም ዝምልከት ነገራት እቲ ቃላት ትገለ ትርጉሙን ብትግርኛ ዘይንረኽበሉ ክኸውን ይኽእል እዩ ሶ hopefully ሓደ መዓልቲ ብትግርኛ ተርጉምና ዝተኻለ መጠን ከነስፋሕ ክንፍትን ኢና ንሕጂ ግን በእንግሊሽ ፕሬዘንት ክገብር so all right let's talk about feminism this I would say is one of the most misunderstood concepts especially when it comes to men when they think about feminism they think about men's rights being eroded or women wanting to dominate the world or something is against me, right? So all the antennas go up whenever the word feminism is uttered. So, however, today my goal is to give you a brief background of what feminism is and how it came about, what it is not. So if I convince each and every one of you at the end of the presentation that feminism is not a bad thing, and it's something that it can get on board on, I have succeeded today. So first, let's define it. What's feminism, right? Feminism, as I have highlighted in that gray section at the top, it's a social movement that advocates for equal rights of women. Now, you'll see in some definitions, it even says equal rights of all genders. So it's not, so feminism, even though initially it had started advocating for women's rights, in the modern era, it actually advocates for all equal rights of all genders. Again, gender has expanded in its scope as well, so we won't get stuck on that one. But at the end of the day, feminism is just about equal rights for all human beings, no matter what gender they are. I think anybody can get on board with this, I would say. So what started feminism, right? What was the need for it? So historically, I think we all agree that women have been marginalized, and it dates back centuries ago, right? In early 3rd century, 2nd century, women actually were considered properties of their husbands. Husbands could literally sell their wives if they want to. So they had no right to decide on what goes on their life's affairs, no right to own property, no right to conduct business. They can't vote. They can't hold public office. They have very little or limited access to education. They can't participate in the professional world. They weren't allowed to make decisions even about their own children without the permission of the husbands or the male figure in their lives. And then on top of that, there were restrictive cultural practices that were detrimental to not only their health, but also their well-being. And one of the things still very commonly talked about issues also sexual abuse prevalent in different parts of the world. So these are some of the grievances that drove women to voice their opinions out there and fight against all the systems and structures that kept them down, right? So they got up and decided to fight against patriarchy because in feminism thinks that or believes that the oppressions and all the issues that women have are based on the fact that most societies are structured in a patriarchal system which means men decide what women do, men decide what kind of rights women will have, men decide what women are supposed to do, not do. Men provide, they're the economic source of women's existence. So feminism believes that patriarchy needs to be shaken up. Other things that need to be done that feminist movement wanted to tackle is cultural and societal oppressions. These needed to be completely dismantled because it very much disfavored women in any given society. The rights of women within any given country, village, tribe was lower than that of men's. So that needed to be addressed. And politically and institutionally, there weren't any laws that prevent any misjustice from happening, and also laws that the woman could use to leverage securing protection and security in their lives. For example, they were not allowed to vote, so that's one thing that they were, by law, they're prevented to go and cast their vote. In fact, if they did, they would go to jail. And so feminism wanted to fight all those institutional political restrictions that were imposed upon them, preventing them from exercising God-given rights out there. Feminism also fights against discrimination. When I say discrimination, especially lately, feminism has evolved into fighting against discrimination, not only for women, but also a wider range of society class, gender, race, it could be class, other things as well. Because at the end of the day, feminist goal, especially in the modern era, is living in harmony where everyone's rights is kept and preserved. And it also fights against sexism. Sexism is basically discrimination, but mainly targeted towards women. I won't drain this slide, I promise. But the reason why I put this slide out here is because I wanted you to know that feminism is not a modern concept. It started long time ago. Even though there aren't very many recorded cases where we could pinpoint, hey, this is where it really started, but there are instances as early as 14th, 15th century where women started writing about the things that are impacting them. But they didn't necessarily go into the core of the issue, the equality of men and women. They just went around, oh, we don't have enough educational opportunities, and we don't like the kind of dresses that you're making us wear, or all these cultures are very oppressive to us. And they kind of tried to peel off all the different issues. They went around it. So slowly, though, the debate on women's rights kind of kept expanding. And what helped is around 18th century, there was a movement called Enlightenment movement, where people started to really philosophically think about concepts around God, nature, humanity, reason, and the relationship of things as a whole, right? So at the end of the day, what this movement uncovered is that for a society to live at peace with itself, it needed knowledge, freedom, and happiness. These are the core things that are needed. So women took a hold of this and said, okay, if a society needs knowledge, it means expansion of education. Freedom means being able to do what you want. Happiness means pursuing what you like to do. Why can't that be extended to us? So women started to push the Enlightenment agenda for their advantage, so that they could gain traction towards their securing equal rights as men. After Enlightenment, other movements followed, like French Revolution, American Revolution, even abolitionism, which is really the movement to free all the slaves at the time. and then other social movements followed. All these things kind of led to the topics of equal rights being talked about openly. Because in the past, as I said, they just simply just kind of went around the different issues that impact them, not necessarily directly asking for equal rights for women. In the US, I'll come back to this later, but in the US, there are so many women that are credited with their feminist movements around, especially in the United States, but we'll go to that. Now, I promise I won't bore you with history, but what I want you to know is that feminism hasn't been static. It has evolved. So you'll hear whenever people talk about feminism, it went through waves. So it went from wave 1 all the way to wave 4. And I just kind of like put these tables to quickly highlight what's wave 1, what happened in there, what were the key achievements, what are the key events that drove that particular time and the movement itself. Okay, so in wave 1, this is around 19th century, early 20th century, okay? So during this time, the feminist movement mainly focused on equality with men. But the way they wanted to go about it is with a laser focus specifically on voting rights. In 1848, they actually had a women's rights convention, and they declared 11 sentiments of the things that they think women should have, right? They wrote 11 sentiments of women's the rights of women that need to be addressed as a country in the United States. So out of that came women's suffrage movement. You probably have heard of this. So this is a movement where women fought for their right to vote. It took about 70 years to secure that. So in 1920 is when women were finally able to vote in the US, 2 years earlier in the UK. Now, for the feminists at the time to secure that right to vote, they wanted the extreme measures of almost like, let me just back a little bit. So I put in the middle section of this immigrant influx. So there's a lot, at that time, there was a lot of European immigrant influx to the US. There were neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods and slums developing. So the women, what I wanted to show here is that the women almost were at a point where they wanted to cut their vote to the slums, but give it to the women. We white working class women need the vote, but we don't mind if you exclude all these poor neighborhoods and slums and other classes in the society. So they were that laser focused. And in that process, they may have alienated a group of people, like, for example, Black women. They didn't feel like they were part of this. It didn't really apply to them at all. And then the working class women felt like, what is voting gonna do for me? It's not gonna solve the issue for me. It didn't solve the issue for Black men. Why would it matter to me, kind of thing? So voting rights achieved, well and good. Many people felt like, okay, so then feminism its work is done. We should just move forward. Done deal, right? But then the feminist movement itself started debating whether the next chapter of feminism is to fight for full equality or to basically just work on the things that women need, like protection in the workplace, equal pay, other things that affect women's day-to-day life. At the time, the Great Depression happened. So this is like early 1930s, 1940s, around that time, and World War II happened. So the feminist movement was slowed down as a result. Because the focus had shifted. So in the first wave, at the early stage of the first wave, there was a laser focus on achieving a voting right. But then after that was achieved, people have been divided. So a lot of organizations, feminist organizations started coming out, like League of Women Voters, Women Trade Union League, National Women Party, National Organization for Women, all of them with slightly different focus on how to achieve either equality or kind of asking for better conditions for women. Wave 2. So wave 2 happened around 1960, 1970, around that time. And around that time, civil rights movement was at its height. During that time, the key asks of the movement were challenging women's roles, employment discrimination, and equal pay. These were at the core of what they're asking for. And again, at this time, in the second wave, they were able to achieve Equal Pays Act to be signed in 1963. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was also amended to include gender as one of the protected classes. And then women were able to get access to male-dominated occupations that were traditionally reserved for men, like construction, pilot, teachers, and things like that, that were mainly just reserved for men. So, however, after this second wave, the thinking about feminism itself got divided. Women started thinking about feminism in 3 different ways. So there were 3 schools of thought that evolved out of this. Now, there are liberal feminism. These women believe in concrete and practical institutional and governmental level changes in order for women to achieve equal rights. There were also radical feminists. These believe in truly like revamping the overall societal structure in order to achieve equal rights for women. And there were a third class of feminists. They call themselves cultural or difference feminists. And these are basically about, hey, I don't have to do equal job, or I don't have to be involved in the same sort of careers as men, but I am unique. I am a unique set of abilities and inclinations, and that should be celebrated type of feminism. And today, in the modern day feminism, you'll see a range of feminist movements that fall in either of these categories. So, third wave. Third wave is fairly recent, and that started around 2012. Sorry about that. This should read, the period for this third wave should be around 1990s, okay? Sorry about the typo. So the focus of feminism by this time has shifted into groups and individuals working towards gender, racial, economic, and social justice. Not just about women, but all these classes, their rights being respected and honored. So it has gotten a little bit more vague. It's almost like going through some sort of a reconstruct in a sense. So the feminist movement of the 90s focused mainly about reframing the story and redefining women and portraying them not as victims, but as assertive, powerful, and in control of their own lives and sexuality. They wanted to make sure that women are not seen as victims, but they own their own fate, type of thing. This, in a way, for the women that led the second wave and the first wave, this would have been like a huge setback when you think about what they'd achieved, and this seemed to go against everything that the first and second wave women had achieved. There weren't that many organizations here because they were so, this was very wide range set of causes and issues to be addressed. So there was one third wave direct action corporation that got set up during that time. But many of the feminists of the 90s don't necessarily agree to one single voice speaking for the feminist movement. So what had happened during the 90s is that feminists became plural in causes and the issues that it addressed, multifaceted. Like there were so many issues to address. There's reproductive rights, there is racial issues, there is gender issues, there is social justice issues. And those became at the center of the feminist movement. And so it's very multi-layered, multifaceted, not a single uniform voice at all. And it started including people from different genders and classes, identities, experiences, interests. It pretty much became a not so clearly defined social movement in a way, because it touched so many areas. The fourth wave is, you probably remember this, many of you. It started around 2012. And this revolved mainly around the issues of sexual harassment, body shaming, rape, all those things that kind of were surfacing and women speaking about them, is what this fourth wave revolved around. The events that drove this fourth wave, first of all, in India, there was a young woman that was gang raped and eventually died, and that angered a lot of women and generally a lot of people. And then there was a GameGate campaign where women fought against the stereotypes of women in games, and that led into men seeing it as an attack on men's rights and death threats towards women, and that also stirred a lot of emotions. And right after the election of President Donald Trump, you all remember the Women's March, where about 4.6 million throughout the country participated in different women rights related activities throughout the country. And also what's key about this time is that women started talking about high profile men, powerful men that had done sexual assault on women, especially Black and Hispanic, and then that
Senait,
led into, yes, go ahead.
أتقلل قبل يا أخي.
Okay, that led into
زين.
the Me Too movement, and this is like still going on, and that's the fourth wave. So feminism is not, as I said, it's not it's not one-dimensional. It can intersect. So if I'm a woman, I'm also a Black woman. I could face sexism and racism as well. So in many cases, sometimes even women may not relate to feminism because there are other issues that take precedence over the issues of gender discrimination. For example, in the early days of feminism, there was a Black woman, freed slave, that joined the feminist movement, and she decided that all these things that you guys are doing doesn't apply to me. Aren't I a woman? So she decided to dedicate her life, however, to the causes of abolitionism, property rights of freed slaves, and things like that. So many Black women in the feminist movement sometimes feel disenfranchised because their experiences don't necessarily jive with the majority of the white feminists out there. So you'll see women that intersect multiple classes, they will tend to pick other causes over the cause of feminism. They still agree to equal rights of women, but still their energy and time will be dedicated to other causes. So feminism definitely has changed the world. It has increased educational opportunities. It has given women right to vote, workplace discrimination protections, making decisions about women's bodies, cultural norms in many parts of the world are changing. That women are participating in different things, including sports and organized religions. Some are pastors already. The reduction of detrimental cultural practices, ending of widow burning. I don't know if you knew, in India they burned widows, so that is part of the feminist movement in India that achieved that. But however, still those issues still linger, right? Not in the Western world, relatively no issues, but still major issues exist around the world. So feminism is not something that can be boxed into one uniform global movement, because the issues are different. If you go to Egypt versus New York versus Hungary versus Australia, the issues are completely different. South Africa, every country has its own issues. So there, in fact, in many cases, the women in the developing world feel like the feminist movement has gone too far and it doesn't represent their main interests. Poverty, all these cultural issues are at the core of their interests, but the current feminist movement may have gone too extreme. I just put in here some of the conferences that happened in the 1980s, 1990s, where the core issues were the veil, FGM, and things like that, contraception, abortion, gay rights, and things like that. And the women in the third world felt like, why is this relevant to me? Right? So there's a little bit of a disconnect in the global sense. So it's not, so feminism has challenges in terms of having a uniform global coherence. Let's talk about, so again, at the end of the day, yeah, well and good. The world has its phases and waves of feminist movement, but what is it like for us? Why do we even want to talk about it, right? So my brothers and sisters have outlined all the issues that our country is going through. So basically, inside Eritrea, we know that there are still deep-rooted cultural norms and expectations that puts extra pressure and disfavors women. Even though, to give credit to the current regime, they made some progress towards reducing FGM and child marriages. Still, those things exist. Broken families are prevalent, and sexual abuse and harassment, and slavery, torture as a result of the military service, the extended military service, is still prevalent in Eritrea. And there are some World Bank statistics out there that I put just for you to read through that shows that women are still behind, way behind in Eritrea, and a lot of catching up to do. The issue with the women in Eritrea is that the so-called emancipation and empowerment, ma'arinat, it's very much celebrated during times of war because women participate in war. But when the dust settles, women are then pushed back to their traditional roles and discrimination and all over again. And to my knowledge, other than the National Women's Association and government mandated women's association, there is no independent feminist movement that I know of. In exile, the issues are compounded by other things. So when it came to America, we also became Black. Our educational backgrounds work against us. Our immigration status works against us as well. Race is on top of that, right? As I said, our income is normally on the lower class. So all these things create a huge intersectional feminist issue for Eritrean women in exile. The issue I see the most troubling, however, is that there are limited participation in the existing feminist movements in the US or otherwise. Eritrean women normally don't take an active part in existing organizations. And to be honest, they don't even feel the sense of ownership of all the existing feminist movements. So at the end of the day, I hope I have given you a quick preview of what feminism is and what feminism isn't. So what I want you to take from this is that, hey, if you had any misunderstandings about feminism, I just want you to know that, yes, you may have thought that feminism is a harmful thing to men. It erodes men's rights. No, you're wrong. Feminism actually does help men because it relieves their patriarchal roles and responsibilities and helps achieve equal rights of both men and women. And some men might think feminism is about hating men. No. In fact, feminism sees men as critical allies. Change cannot come without the involvement of men, brothers, and husbands alike. And feminism is a Western issue, is another misconception, but I think we've shown that it's not a Western issue. Women's issues are all over. It may be unique to each and every country, but it's definitely not a Western issue. And some people think only women can be feminists. No, you, my brothers and sisters, you can be feminists too, as long as you believe in equal rights of the genders. And another misconception is that all feminists are the same. They all want to dominate the world and to have women at the top and everything. No, that's not the case. Feminism addresses a myriad of issues, from race to gender to class to education to other issues as well. So I hope I've convinced you today that feminism is not such a bad thing and we need it as a country and as a society. Thank you.
يغني سنايت تسفى قبر بزح نقرات هيباتنا لا بزح نقرات وسيدنا هنكون كا تسفى قبر أبز قد سلكا تقرنيا كوينون بزحات شرك خلالنا تسفى قبر ماتي بتعمي قنيلا تاقزيه قنو مويتاتنا سلزلا حتو رئيتو غرقري أين هبنينا بمستنى يغريتو مالتيو